and then they're doing mine. So they have these two people that have done, books with larger presses or larger independent presses. She did. I mean, mine was like Count Soft Skull. Hers was Bloomsbury. So, but we've been on that trajectory of people that have had a thing and then not been sustained, not being held by the publisher. So she's got a couple of great books in the pipeline. But yeah, so they've moved away from the debut model exclusively towards taking some old cats, I guess. Yeah.
I'm going to buy you a drink in a minute.
That's what I'm waiting for.
Yeah,
I'm only doing this to get.
That's why we're all doing it. It's just that there's a queue at the bar. So here we are, Outlaw Bookseller, Bath. This morning I'm here with my good friends James Reich, novelist, critic, educator, all-round good guy. We used to work together years ago. Yeah, I mean you've been involved in that.
I'll take it.
And Alistair McNaught, novelist. Let's say publishing worker. Shall we say that? Would you call yourself a publishing worker? Both published novelists, men of achievement. And we're just having a drink here. And, this will get edited into something that's shape. But this morning I was doing an interview with M. John Harrison, which of course will be very professional, as you know. So this is not an afterthought. It's not an afterthought at all. It's just that this is the way it's turning out. So we're going to talk about it. And you're talking about...
This took weeks of planning to get here.
It did.
This is a 3,000-mile trip.
Absolutely.
To speak to Alistair. Oh, I see.
Yeah. Alistair was just passing by, which is great. Because, it's contingency. It's that thing, isn't it?
I haven't seen Alistair in...
How long has it been?
11, 12 years. Since we had a bookstore down the street from the camera.
Secession Books.
Yeah.
That's right.
We used to see you on the regular basis. And, it was probably 2006. When we were last in the same room.
So, it's fantastic stuff.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, and you were just walking past, and Alistair and I see each other fairly regularly, but it's just great. It's great to be in touch. You're talking about this publisher that you're working with, who are called
713. 7.7.13 books.
Okay.
Headed by Leland Chuck, who is a writer publisher, and the date has the publisher name. The 713 has personal significance to him, and they've mostly done really good debut fiction, and recently they've picked up a couple of us non-debut folks. So that's where the new novel has a home.
Right. Okay. Good stuff. So that's where your new novel is going to appear.
Yeah, September.
James and I first met in the late 90s, and we worked together for 5 years. And we had
97.
Lots of 97, and we had lots of great times. Did lots of things together, music, talk about literature, and what have you. We drank quite a lot of beer and cider at the time, and he's waiting for his cider because I got to wait for the queue to recede at the bar. And you have now written how many novels? 6.
The novel from September is the 6th novel. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And the new novel is entitled
The Moth for the Star.
The Moth for the Star. And what we're going to do, we're going to flick also pictures of the books up on the screen. Now, Alistair, your novel is entitled
A Tragical History of Campbell McCluskey.
And actually, Alistair is from Scotland, and so we've got a real international thing here. James, even though James where were you born in Stroud?
I was born in Stroud.
Yeah. You spent some time in the Isle of Wight.
Yeah.
Like the good doctor Timothy Coombe. Yeah.
The Isle of Wight with Tennyson and Tennyson and the beheading, the trial of Charles.
Yeah.
Speaking of contemporary kingdom.
Yeah. But you're not a contemporary of Tennyson's, obviously.
No, I'm not quite. God, I barely remember Tennyson. We used to hang out all the time.
Idylls of the King.
But so Stroud, Gloucestershire, the Isle of Wight, and now Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Absolutely, yeah. And
a US citizen now, no longer an Englishman, apparently.
Good grief!
I know.
And you have written among your oeuvre. I mean, you're a guy who sort of goes across different genres. You don't have any boundaries, and you have technically one science fiction novel. Would we say? Yeah,
there's
speculative elements.
Yeah, there's a second that will probably appear in 2024, but the official there's one published SF novel.
Yeah, which is The Songs My Enemies Sing.
The Song My Enemies Sing.
My Enemies Sing, which is set on Mars. And we'll talk about that a bit more. So we're making this as we go along. So James has been very fortunate, but not just fortunate, but deservedly so. He has had acclaim from two of our absolute greats in the realm of SF, the very wonderful Michael Moorcock, who loved your novel Soft Invasions.
Yes. Yeah.
That was great, wasn't it? Mike loved that, and he described it as elegiac, didn't he?
Yeah. Well,
that was wonderful.
I think. Yeah. I mean, I think maybe what resonated was the fact that was a doppelganger novel. It's not actually a multiverse novel. Because I think the except for Mike's work in the 20th century, the multiverse is essentially kind of played out.
Yes.
So it's a doppelganger novel, and I think maybe that multiple identity thing appealed to him. Hopefully.
Yeah. And I mean, but it's praise indeed. It's great to have praise from somebody like Mike, and also you garnered some praise from the very wonderful Barry N. Malzberg.
The Barry. Yeah.
Which again is high praise indeed, because Barry doesn't like anything.
No.
Does he? No, he doesn't. Well, he does. I mean, Barry's very. I mean, the thing which characterises Barry's criticism to me is Barry has been, not to say that you're an underdog or an avant-garde figure, which you're proudly an avant-garde figure, but I mean, Barry is one of those people who you'll see a collection pop up from, say, somebody like Chris Neville, and Barry will say, this guy is the business. He champions people who should be read and who are often not.
He's essentially. I mean, I think people tire of me saying it, but honestly, I do think, not necessarily in the epic nature of Mailer's novels, but I do think in the way that Malzberg wrote about sex and violence and was an existential writer in a genre sometimes. That Malzberg is kind of the Mailer of science fiction, and that's what I appreciate.
Do you know, it's funny, I always think of Norman Spidrell in that way, but at the same time I can see exactly what you're saying. I was flicking through YouTube last night, and have you ever seen the BBC archive? There's a thing called there's a BBC archive. It's better than the iPlayer because there's more stuff on it. Because even though the iPlayer's got Adam Curtis's documentaries on there, which are amazing. Have you ever seen Adam Curtis?
Oh, you're talking about The Century of the Self?
Yeah.
I can't see them now because they don't have.
You're in the States.
iPlayer doesn't work in the States. Thank you, BBC.
Adam and I'm paying for it, and you're paying for it.
I think I got The Century of the Self on DVD.
They were on
DVD years ago. Great stuff.
Yeah. But anyway, I was watching, flicking through BBC Archive, which is a fairly recently launched YouTube channel, and there was a short film which was people talking about George Orwell, and Auden was on there with his enormously craggy face, and he was fantastic. And there were a couple of other people I didn't recognise. It started with Michael Foot, and a legend came up saying Michael Foot, who we know is a big Orwellian, and
It's craggy.
And Norman Mailer came up, and Norman Mailer was talking about Keep the Aspidistra Flying, which was amazing, because if you'd said to me, would you expect Mailer to talk about Orwell? And you'd say, well, yeah, probably, but you expect him to talk about the Orwell that everybody knows. You make that blanket anti-intellectual stupid assumption, which I made. It's probably just me making that assumption, that he would talk about Animal Farm in 1984. But he talked about Keep the Aspidistra Flying, and he talked about the Orwell's class consciousness and what have you. And it was just wonderful.
That's the thing. That's what for me Mailer would get, is that he would get The Road to Wigan Pier, because he would get that sense of, Orwell objected to the tweedy academic, sometime the academic Marxists who essentially resented both the poor and the rich, the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. And Mailer had the class consciousness I don't think I've ever read anything where Mailer notes that Wigan Pier passage, but it's the part that essentially says in Wigan Pier that there's that pipe-smoking Tweedy brand of Marxist academic that doesn't actually love the poor but resents the rich.
Yes,
and that's what it comes down to. But I think Mailer would have probably got that. Would have been on Orwell's side.
While you're in the UK, if you can have a look at it, it's worth saying, because it's Norman when he's at his full-blown curly-haired, before he's grey and old and stuff. It's great. But I read an article. I think it was in. It was either in. I'm trying to think what it was in. I think it was in the New York Review of Books about a year ago, and it was a great article about Norman Mailer's libraries, and how he had two, and again I'm completely sort of not remembering it in any great detail, but it was wonderful because it was talking about the Writers' Library as a research tool.
You just
and
like
the
two
time-
libraries would be good.
Yeah, he just had two libraries, and
Yeah.
I guess I was just jealous of that. But
Yeah.
and he showed lots of photographs, and it was a fantastic piece of journalism, so it really was. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go down and try and buy these guys a drink. I'm going to let it run. They might say something profound, so I'm going to keep it running. So
We just talk
but
about-
you
we
talk
talk about
just
Steve.
talk. You can talk about me if you want, yeah, because I already together. So yeah, but carry on. I'll see what I can do.
Ice in the cider.
Nice inside.
Yeah. Wow. Surreal.
That's unbelievable. Yeah, I can't.
So tell me about your book. What do we need to know about? So tell the title again because it was a long
The
title.
tragical history of Campbell McCluskey.
Is it based on anybody in
No,
a
it's
real life personage?
well, it's. I was going to write a novel about Christopher Marlowe, and I couldn't.
That sounds like a good idea as well.
Couldn't find any way of doing that. So I kind of based it on Christopher Marlowe because I was interested in the fact.
Oh, since it's the CM.
Because it was like some people said it was a conspiracy to kill him, and other people said no, it was a chance.
Right.
Killing. So it was that was what I was wanting to write about. How is are we predestined or are we not?
What do you remember what mock? I don't remember because I've been trying to get back into that kind of sort of almost. It's not exactly the same as what you're talking about, but I've been trying to recently get back into that Elizabethan esoterica and hermeticism and that kind of stuff. Did Marlowe believe in predestination, and was he a fatalist?
No,
I don't remember.
He was. I think he did get arrested for it. I mean, he was possibly a virgin atheism, and he was. He was in Walter Raleigh's
That's a relief.
School of the Night.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was all kinds of theories about him, but it was I just took it was that idea that you because we've only got one life, you can't tell whether you're predestined or not.
Yeah,
because you can look back and everything seems predestined.
Yeah,
See
in retrospect, everything looks like fate. Yeah,
but when you're looking forward, everything seems possible.
Yeah,
but is everything possible? And it's like so that's what. So my aim was to write a novel that. Like it's ended up as a biography of a Scottish playwright in the 50s who gets murdered in the same way as Christopher Marlowe gets killed.
Yeah.
And then I just took elements of life and then just reset it so he gets involved in the sort of criminal underworld.
Cool.
But I wrote it and this is the main stumbling block for publishers. I wrote it like a biography.
Right.
There's no
like a fictional biography.
not even a fictional biography.
Yeah.
It's like his life unfolds. There's lots of characters. There's no apparent relevance to what's going on,
Okay.
or why why did he have those love affairs? Why did he have those specific love affairs? It's and then it's underpinned with all these hidden patterns and structures where it's possible that it's predestination comes in. So it's very. I think that's what stuck. Because they would be wanting a small number of characters,
Right.
or maybe symbolize things. And I wasn't wanting to do that. I was wanting to give an impression of a life.
Right.
So
As in, yeah. I guess in fantasy novels it would be. Well, it's strange because in fantasy novels, the world building is landscape and magical systems, and then sometimes I had this same issue the other day when I was reading someone's novel in a manuscript, and it did have a lot of characters, and in some ways, well, that's realistic. That's life. I mean, people do know a lot of peripheral characters, and then how does that function in the novel? In one sense, that is world building. That's realistic to have nephews and roommates and peripheral folk that don't necessarily have consequence for the plot, for the character's life. But yeah, I remember I was having this kind of an aesthetic dilemma because I mean, most of us do know a lot of peripheral characters, and there's the artificial nature of the novel where that isn't tolerable. Right. That's a problem for the novel because it becomes, sure, you know these people, but we don't want to know about them. Yeah. That's the person's life. So you stuck by the number of you.
Well, I yes. I mean, it does. Some people I have had readers who have said, surprising readers who seem to cope with it all right. And when my daughter,
so maybe it's not a problem at all.
so my daughter said, and my younger daughter said, there's quite a few. There are a few authors,
Your book is
characters.
going to be delivered. This is the thing. This is the thing. When you want
Not
to
even by drone.
That's mine. Yours is going to be delivered.
Oh, it must have been delivered by drone, actually.
A gentleman with corkscrew hair is going to deliver it.
Oh, I know.
I ain't no square with my corkscrew hair, as Mark Boland said. I think we're still running. Are you rolling, Ken? Are you rolling? Yeah, we've got 45 minutes.
We said all the good stuff.
Good, that's great.
No, we were talking about, very similar to the way in which in real life people know a great many peripheral characters, and how that could, and sometimes in the world of publishing cannot translate into
that's
novel.
good. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank you.
There you go. Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Go
And
on.
you were saying, you were explaining how you held on to that notion of lots of characters.
Yeah.
But I wanted to create a surface in my character's life of the chaos of existence.
The surface. That's it. Yeah.
And then underneath there's to a greater or lesser extent there's patterns and repetitions.
I think with your novel, what I found when I read it was that there's that introductory section which is very much story and it sets a scene, and it was very well written, and it felt like story. And I thought, and then of course, as you say, you bring all the messy stuff in and all the levels accumulate, and that was great. It was really, really good. So.
You were talking about the fatalism and the predestination in the novel, and you said how there was a structure in it. Is the structure? I mean, I don't want to, without ruining the novel, I guess it's a yes or no. I mean, are you playing with some kind of occult structure beneath that? That's a real structure that people believed in, or have you made one up?
It was more of a shape, really.
A shape.
The two main influences on it were the real life of Sebastian Knight by Moorcock and Borges's short story, Death in the Compass. The shape that I hit upon was the Isle of Wight.
Oh, I lived there.
I'm not going to say any more about it,
Yeah.
because that would be a real spoiler. But
It's 13 by 8.
needless to say,
Diamondic.
the cover was made by a printmaker. We discussed the design, and even the design of the cover indicates it has got some relevance to.
It's funny. I found out recently that the church near where I live, which I've never actually been inside, it pops up in a little book which I was shelving the other day, which is a book on mazes and labyrinths, and apparently there's this mosaic or something in the floor, and I just read a little bit because I was flicking through this book and it said Bath Eastern, and I thought I must go and have a look at this, and I thought before I know it I'll turn into Ian Sinclair, which can be a good gambit, But your novel, I mean, going back to the cover, which will flash up on the screen, and everybody who's watching this in its edited form will see. I naturally, instantly thought of Alistair Gray, him being a Scot, he being a great sort of graphic artist and what have you. But thinking about your novel, which something you and I've never discussed it in much depth, is was Gray an influence in any way?
Yes, well, Alistair Gray.
Inescapably, I guess.
I read Lanark when I was in my early 20s, but it wasn't. It was the fact that he'd written a novel set in Glasgow that was slightly fantastical, and didn't involve sort of the working class or the dour side of Glasgow. It wasn't like a working class novel, which it tended to be. I mean, I've read Archie Hines' Dear Green Place recently. That's a beautifully written working class novel about a writer struggling against being working class. But Alistair Gray, certainly, it wasn't so much an influence. I mean, I am influenced to some extent by his style. He's more polemical.
Well, he's sort of. I mean, the word. If I think about Alistair Gray in a political sense, the word radical immediately comes to mind. But I just to sort of go on a tangent here. My favourite book by Gray, I've not read all his over. I read about 5-6 of his books. My favourite book by him, the one which had the biggest impact on me, was 1982 Janine. which is, I think, it's absolutely wonderful. Have you ever read that?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, and I think Canongate do it now in the Canon, still there. And it's a great book because the thing about 1982 Geneva, just describe it in very basic essence. It's the internal monologue of a guy who's travelling around the country, and I think he's travelling around more than just Scotland, and he's a conservative, and it's his internal monologue, and he's travelling around the country and he's installing and testing alarm systems, different places. And what you get in his head is you get him doing this mundane thing, and he's travelling around, and he has lots of time in his own in hotel rooms, and you get his sexual fantasies, and they're repeated, and there's slight variations on them. But it gradually transforms into this wonderful reminiscence of when he gets involved with a theatre group when he's much younger, and it's a book which metamorphosises into something else. And I just think it's one of, I mean, I'm a big... I'm not sure. I must have been...
It was published in '84. It wasn't.
There you go.
It was meant to come out in '82.
Yeah.
But it got delayed.
So it's after Lanark, isn't it? Which is, Lanark is your classic sort of Joycean novel in terms of the way it's always been packaged and presented. It's that difficult.
I always just associate those shifts towards theatre and so on with. I mean, is it? I mean, I don't know the novel. Those shifts sound postmodern. Yeah, those shifts sound like
you'd love it. I mean, it's
not
great.
Not necessarily in a negative sense, but that kind of the carnival, the circus, the salon.
Yeah, it is. There is a slight Planet of Less thing, but at the same time, it's very realist. And it's funny because my experience of the Scots novel is that I've generally found I don't think I've ever been disappointed by a Scots writer. They've all been brilliant, and maybe it's just me.
You read the pornographers first.
Yeah, well, I mean, Alexander Trocky, is a big thing for me, and Stevenson, and Alan Warner. I mean, Alan Warner, I would say, have you ever read Morven Calle at all? Morven Calle is a wonderful novel, but he's become for me a one-book writer, where I love that book so much. And at times the style reminds me of Camus, and there's a very good film of it. But as with all films, there is something which isn't revealed and something which is subtle. And I remember reading it, I just felt this sort of touch of Camus in it. And I've read other books by him. I read one which is about trains. I'll flash it up on the screen. And I read another one which is about a guy who's a caretaker at a big country house for a rock star in the 70s, and it was published by White Rabbit Press, who do rock and roll books, as you know. And neither of them worked for me, so I guess he's a one-book author for me. But this is the thing. I mean, the Scots tradition is really good. Talking about SF briefly, I want
to do an apology.
Do an apology
because I just knew that you'd read Trocky first. So I don't believe that all Scottish novelists are pornographers. No. You read the pornography first.
Well, I did.
Trocky was very much in my mind.
I actually can't remember. I mean, the first Scots writer I read would have been Stevenson. But
that was a personal joke.
Yeah.
Not a national slur.
There is a lot of pornography in 1982 Janine.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
But that is very interesting because it is.
Well, it is literal pornography. It is the depiction of whores, isn't it? It's the literal sense. It's a kind of graffiti.
But as that's the beauty of it, as it comes. Well, that was my favourite part of it. You realise, it's got a lot about his inability to relate to women.
Right. It's got that looping thing of fantasy, which is the internal world of looping, and then it spreads out into when he becomes, I guess you could say, more aspirational in his contact with human beings. Maybe I don't know.
I think it possibly reflected some of Alistair Gray's difficulties. With women when he was a young man.
But I mean, in your writing, you're a modernist, you're both modernists, you're both people who embrace difficulty as part of the modern project. And I mean, in your work, you very much did that, and you've always done that in your work. Just to talk about your work a bit more, I mean, I say there's 6 novels, and we mentioned briefly Barry and Malzberg and how you have been involved with. You wrote introduction to the current edition of Beyond Apollo, isn't it? Yeah. And our connection with that is the way back when we were working together.
That's something you absolutely should not read for spoilers of the novel. I mean, I think it does begin.
Should be an afterword, maybe.
Definitely. I mean, it's in the right place in terms of how we publish, but I think I wrote to Barry about something I'd said in the introduction, and it was. It sounds self-aggrandizing to say, yeah, you're the only person that got it. So there's a significant spoiler in the novel, in the introduction to the novel. But Beyond Apollo is such an unusual SF novel, obviously controversial in the awards scene, obviously upset everybody. And what's nice about doing that introduction is that I've become friendly with a guy named Michael Grodner, who was holding the film rights and had got to a certain point with the film of Beyond Apollo. And that's how we began talking and working on other things. But yeah, Beyond Apollo as a film still should happen, but I think one of the things about it is that it is, let's say, in a way it shouldn't be at all, but there is it shouldn't be regarded as perverse in this day and age. I mean, it was certainly controversial in its day, but one of the things about it is it has this scatology and a perversity to it that is, it doesn't even, to me, it doesn't even necessarily feel like a 70s novel. There's something almost 1960s or 50s about it.
Very much so, yeah. I mean, I always see it.
But it becomes, if you try to be authentic to the novel and its concerns, to go back to slightly tangent with or dovetail with Mailer, the great thing about Mailer's A Fire on the Moon is he asks these bizarre questions like, well, what does NASA smell like, and how NASA has no smell, and that's Malzberg's Space is Asepsis.
Because it's the Mailer book about the moon,
Space is Asepsis, right? So it has no visceral qualities, and Malzberg's trying to put visceral qualities back in the science fiction novel, partly through these potential, maybe they're imagined, maybe they're not, these homosexual encounters, right? So there's and the kind of the use of Venus, not just as an archetypal planet of love, but essentially as a toilet.